I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today I'm joined by the wonderful director Sarah Dowland to talk all about her film Sue Bird in the Clutch. And in starting off, one of the things I always find so interesting about documentary filmmaking is there's the idea that you have of the story that you want to tell, but you never really know where the story is going to take you. And I was interested in what that journey was like for you in terms of the initial concept of capturing Sue's career, but then also following her in real time and seeing where the story took you naturally.
Well, the concept originally to tell the film, tell Sue's story, was to follow her in her final year and then use that as the spine of the story. We'd follow through her through that season, and then we would also be jumping forward and back in time to tell different parts of her career. But what ended up happening in 2021 was we got to the end of filming that season with her, and Sue decided she wasn't going to retire. So at that moment, she was like, I think actually I'm going to play another year. And so she thinks about it and decides that's what she's going to do. So the biggest change for us from the beginning was that she didn't actually retire in 2021 and she played another year. But I use that in the film because I think that is part of the experience, not only of what really happened, but of being a professional athlete. Like, you can feel it, and Sue talks about it in the film where she starts to get a sense of, like, maybe her body's going a little bit, like maybe things are changing, maybe it's getting time, but is this actually the right time? And it's a very, very difficult and personal decision. So that was one big change that happened, was like, all right, okay, so we're going to film another season with her. And then the other thing, that even though I kept those elements in the film in terms of following her through her retirement year and then using that as a springboard to jump forward and back to tell you about the significant components in her career, was that I discovered it was really a coming of age story. And I didn't factor that really at the beginning. But once I started doing interviews with her teammates, with her coaches, researching her story more, the story of the WNBA, I realized that because she had been there the longest out of any player in the league, that really her sort of coming of age mirrored the W's coming of age too. At the same time that Sue is really finding her voice, the W is also really coming into its own. So I wasn't anticipating that at the beginning, but I certainly found that to be probably the most significant part of the story.
And there's also that kind of thing in the film where you're telling Sue's story specifically, but just like you were saying that there's also a coming of age of the WNBA, there's moments where you're able to kind of broaden the story a little bit and look at the wider context of how her career fits into a bigger story and then kind of come back to that spine. And so how did you set about finding, in essence, like that expansion and contraction throughout the film?
I think that really just happened fairly organically. I didn't have to kind of orchestrate that really in any way, because there just were all of these kind of natural moments that provided, that expansion and contraction in the story. So, Sue, especially, like, if I think about the theme of like how the W used to market women, and this idea that they always had to be sort of sexualized, or they had to be sort of in dresses or marketed in these very cliched feminine ways in order for people to be interested in going to see them play the game. I think that very much was kind of mirrored in Sue's personal world as well, just her like awkwardness at trying to actually find an identity and how she would actually project that. So those sort of bigger things that were happening in the league were also mirrored in Sue's world, and vice versa. So it just allowed me these really nice ways of kind of getting in and out of different aspects, and to be able to explore some themes on a kind of broader scale when we needed to.
And you have this huge wealth of archival material for her. And it sounds like you got a lot of stuff from UConn and even from Sue herself, and, home videos that her family had taken or photographs that they had. And so what was the starting point, particularly when it came to a lot of like the personal archival material of like really starting to just go through it, watching all the VHS tapes, looking at all the photos, and really finding what was going to fit into the story that you were telling?
Well, personal archives are always my favorite because you will never see that material anywhere else. And whoever has taken it like that also has, says so much about the material that you're working with as well. And I always, every film I've worked on, whenever someone is enthusiastic about sharing their personal archive, they are, but probably like any of us, actually getting them to go and do the digging to find where it all is and to get it for you is a whole nother thing. And I know I would be the same if someone suddenly said, can you share some photos? Most of us have thousands available on our computers, even if they're things that have been scanned from olden times. But it takes time to go through and actually curate those. So, but fortunately, because Sue didn't retire in 21, we had that extra year to kind of, chase her and her family and friends, to be able to give us whatever they had. But we could take several bites at the cherry, if you like, where we would sort of do a round of asking people for a while, push that agenda, and then try and get some more. UConn were absolutely fantastic. We did trips to Connecticut to be able to just go and work with them to see what was in their archive. I mean, everything they have on Sue is extensive, and they were so generous. So we were really able to take away a lot of materials, both in print and in video. The WNBA, obviously, that was part of a much bigger negotiation because the WNBA is owned by the NBA, and that needed to form part of a bigger licensing deal. So what we did was we just cut the film with all of the pieces that we ideally wanted, and then kind of, kept our fingers crossed that we would get approval to keep all of them in the film. So, that was a little bit of a chicken and egg there, but it's always that way. If you're working with a large league that has a lot of investment in, their IP, then you need to be certainly cognizant of how to work with that material.
And then there's also a lot of footage in the film, obviously, of Sue playing. And there's kind of 2 points to that. One is it communicates to the audience her level of skill in how she plays. And then the other is, what is the story that if I use this particular clip from the game is going to tell the audience in terms of the conversation that we're having on screen right now. And so how would you set about, going through game footage of her like over the years? Because again, you have archival games, you have the fact that you were following her, you were able to like film her on the court yourself, I imagine, and really just finding out of an entire game, what's the 30-second clip that's going to tell the audience the most about these two things.
That's a real skill, I think, actually, having to go through all of those games and then just kind of picking out very small pieces, because to really tell the story of any game, you need the whole thing. But the film is not about the broadcast of a game, and certainly some of her older games, not the ones that we were there filming, but they're filmed from broadcast cameras. So that's the only view of the play that you're going to get is whatever was filmed. And of course, they didn't know at that time that we were going to come along and make a film about Sue Bird. So their cameras are just following the ball and the play. They're not necessarily following Sue. So in any of those instances, I was always looking for that, like where are the games and the moments where we were, where the cameras were already on Sue or where we were on Sue. But the film is called In the Clutch because when she was in college, that's what she really became known for, was that in those really big moments, those game-defining moments, Sue could come up with the big play. And really that was her DNA throughout her whole career. If a big shot needed to be made, you want to get it into her hands, she's going to make the shot. So, she just is under pressure, she is a very, very calm, clear-headed player. She doesn't suffer from nerves or anything like that. She just is able to execute, and she can just rely on all of those years of experience at that level to produce at the highest level. So when I'm looking through the archive, those are the moments I'm trying to find and to really capture what the excitement feels like as a fan to be there in the arena, to see her make that kind of play. And she made that at all stages of her career. And I wanted to really show that, you know, ageism has no place when it comes to Sue Bird and probably really any other player who is elite, because the work that, you know, she does or was doing to keep her body in shape and to be able to produce those kinds of results. She won 2 titles in 2018, 2020, you know, when she's, you know, the 2020, she's 40 that year, you know, and winning a title. So I really wanted to show her producing at the top level at all stages of her career.
And I think to that point as well, the film really captures just exactly what it takes to achieve athleticism at that level. You know, and we have her talking about, I've probably been like dribbling a ball since the moment that I could walk, and how much it becomes part of your identity, because it is every single day. It's something that you have to be cognizant of 7 days a week, even when you're a kid, in order to get to that level in the first place. And then obviously once you're in that space. And so what was important to you and to Sue to really communicate about that level of dedication and just some of the aspects of what it takes and what actually goes into that?
For me, a really important part of the physical journey that Sue took is one aspect is the number of injuries that anyone who is at that elite level is usually playing with, managing and carrying at all times. And for Sue, it started with tearing her ACL when she was in college. So it starts very early for her, and then her whole career really becomes about managing her knee. But in addition to that, you know, she's had like, you know, multiple hip surgeries. She's broken her nose 5 times. You know, there's all these other things that go on. But they're also, you know, this is their whole career. So at any point, they're only one injury away from a career ending, you know, game. So it's really, their relationship with their bodies is so unique and so important and so different to anything else that, you know, even the fitness junkies in us, you know, this really is a whole nother level, because they really need to be performing at such a high level all the time. But in Sue's story, you know, she had a couple of rough years in there where physically she was facing those challenges. Her body wasn't really recovering and responding in the way that she wanted. So she starts working with a coach who just helps her specialize and program, you know, a way to get her body into the best shape to be able to work with the limitations that she has and still play the kind of basketball that she wants to play. And Sue is incredibly competitive. So only the best is going to do. Only being able to perform at the highest level is going to satisfy her. But it takes another level of work. And I know that Sue's really proud of that, because that change in her, and I think especially in 2018 when she wins her 3rd WNBA championship that year, but her performance in those playoffs, I mean, it is legacy stuff. It is absolutely incredible. And the kind of fire that she has and the ability that she shows on the court there, that inspires so many other players that are like, huh, what's Sue Bird doing that's got her playing like that at this level and at this stage in her career? And so that inspired other players to also go and get specific fitness training programs like she had done. And so I think that for her is like, I actually helped kind of set that path up and set that, you know, way for other players to follow.
And there's something to be said with like even just the position that she plays, and like being a point guard, being very much in service of every single player on the team. And you kind of see that in her personality. And as a result, she's also not someone who naturally walks into a room and is like, I'm the greatest player in the WNBA. That's not who she is as a person. And so how did you make sure that the film was communicating just the level of accomplishment and achievement that she has had throughout her entire career, in a space where she's not necessarily going to be the person to sit on camera and tell you that, but you want to make sure that the audience feels that?
Right. It's so true. Like Sue is so humble. So she is not that point guard that kind of walks out and is very vocal with her team, and but there's so much communication, and I don't know if quiet communication is the way. Maybe it's respectful communication is probably the key to it, because whenever she's there, I think there's just a gravitas that she brings whenever she is on the court, and it raises the bar for everyone around her. So I would see the players, of her team just want to elevate that little bit extra because, it's Sue. And if Sue is calling the play and you don't hit the mark that she wants you to hit, or you're not in the spot that she had told you to be in, I don't think anybody wants to be on the receiving end of the wrath of that. So they just elevate themselves to make sure that they're playing at a level that is, a Sue Bird level. And that was really the way that she led the team. It was just this respectful, friendly, very approachable way. And most of us are probably more used to that cliche. I'm gonna, be much more demonstrative, and I'm gonna rah and get everybody kind of G'd up. But she really saves her energy like that for very, very specific moments. And I noticed that whenever Sue would get, really kind of revved up, the arenas would just go berserk. It's just like, oh my goodness, like Sue Bird's just hit another gear, and this is about to get real.
And there were also some unique aspects in terms of how you ended up filming this, because when she went to Japan, because of COVID protocols at the time, you and your team couldn't travel with her. And so at that point, it then switched to working with Sue on, we'd love to have you film yourself and kind of like film almost these diary segments. And so what was that experience of just shifting the way that you were filming it, but also kind of, again, I think just going back to that idea of like unexpected moments, kind of the unexpected moments that came out of it in terms of seeing what is it that she's choosing to kind of sit in front of the camera and tell me.
I loved it, and actually, if there's one section I wish I could have expanded upon in the film, it would have been to have had more of her diary entries from that time, because it was so fascinating and interesting to see the Olympics from her point of view. And obviously, she could only film within the world of the hotel. So, that because of the COVID restrictions, there were huge limitations on filming. Only certain cameras were allowed in that were pre-approved. Obviously, they weren't ours. So we were going to have to either get access to that footage or film our own. We did have a local team film at least some exteriors for us in Tokyo, just to kind of set the stage so that the audience would know, where we are in the world of the film. But I just love seeing what Sue decided, to film and talk about. It was wonderful. And she was prolific at it as well. Like, I literally had hundreds of videos from her. And we would have a production team, a Japanese production team, that would go to her hotel and get the downloads from her on a regular basis. And then they would send those drives across to us in the US. And then I would get this little package and, excitedly sit down to be able to watch all of the little video diaries that Sue had sent us. So yeah, for me, it was just a matter of talking to her about the kind of thing that I was looking for and hoping to capture. And then we set her up with, we rented out an iPhone for her to use, got that as a package separate to her own personal phone, so that she could just film on that or give it to other players to film her, or whatever was, whatever really kind of she thought was interesting. And I would just ask her a bit about, like, what's the schedule? What kinds of things are you doing? So that I would have a sense of, what we might be able to capture through a diary entry. But really, it was on her. It was completely all on her, because it had to be when she had time. As the point guard and the spokesperson for the Team USA, like, she is very, very busy in that role at all times at the Olympics. So that she took the time out to also do this for the documentary was just, like, really just such a blessing for us.
It feels like overall she was very open as a documentary subject for you as well, because even just, kind of like letting you into her home and seeing like some of those off the cuff moments with her and Megan Rapinoe, for example, that gives a lot of layer and texture for the audience as well. And so what was that kind of initial process of like building that relationship and kind of like opening up into that space of trust, because she's obviously been filmed several times throughout her career, but this is the first time that she's sat down and been the subject of a documentary in this way.
She was really gracious about letting us follow her around. I'm sure that, it was probably painful at certain times for her. But really, I just tried to be respectful and just communicate to her what it is that I wanted, and trying to be at as many different events that she was going to, whether they were private events or, events for the W as possible. Because if you want those moments, you don't know when they're going to come. And you just want, as a filmmaker, to have as many choices as possible. I knew that I wanted a way of really reflecting her interior life. And I felt like home scenes were going to be an important part of being able to feel like we were getting closer to what that world looks like, because she can't always be operating up here all the time like she does when she's on the court. Like there are moments where she needs to kind of come down, and she's more reflective and just quiet, or maybe she just needs to relax and release some stress by hanging out with friends. And so I wanted to get a sense of, what does that other piece of this look like? Like, how do you have to be in order to suddenly switch a gear and perform at this super high level? Like, what is the flip side of that look like? So I think when she knew that that's like, there was a story purpose to it, and she understood that, then I think she felt comfortable about having us around.
Yeah. And it's also so wonderful getting to look at the conversations and what it looks like to be going through the experience of this sport, and being an athlete has been a key part of my identity and my everyday existence for decades of my life. And what does it look like to contemplate the other side of this? And I feel like we get to see her go on this like really beautiful journey of self-reflection and kind of discovery, and finding the way that she wants to still advocate for players in the WNBA in a lot of ways as well, even outside of the game. And so what was that like for you as a filmmaker, getting to really kind of capture so many self-reflective moments of such a pivotal point of that journey? Because I think for all the sports docs I've watched over the years, I don't know if I've watched one that's captured that specific moment in a career before.
It was so exciting for us to just see her, for want of a better word, blossoming at in real time. And because really that was what we wanted when we set off, to make this film, or set out to make this film. It really was with this idea that she should be a bigger household name. Given all the things that she's done, we really wanted her to have that recognition, and for her platform to just be, something that was really solidified because of all the work that she'd put in. And now, like, what I've been loving as a result of this film is it really has given her that platform. Just hearing her talk about her career and what she's doing now as an activist, what she was doing in the league, whether she was advocating for, a new CBA, which is the collective bargaining agreement for the players. She played a huge role in the new one that was negotiated in 2020. She's done a lot of activism work. She's continuing to advocate for female athletes. She has her own production company now with Megan Rapinoe, and also another company that she's a co-founder of. And so it's just like, to know that we were kind of getting all of that in the film as it was happening in real time was just wonderful, because I just knew that, like, after the film, it was just going to have this growth and progression, and she would just take that messaging and blossom into, all the things that she's doing now.
Yeah, it's really special to kind of get to see that play out in real time through the film. And I love that you were able to kind of create this documentary and film her going through that, and to make her more of a household name than she already is. So congratulations on an amazing film, and thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. This has been wonderful.